whatever, and fire stick. And yeah. All right, it is time to get started, and good to see those of us that are here this morning. We are a little bit shy on folks so far. We know we got some that's out of town that's not going to be here today or not here this morning. I know we have some that are sick. Remember these different ones. Certainly Martha Tisdale, as she's recovering from her recent surgery and is doing pretty good, but hadn't been able to be out yet. So continue to remember her. You know, Trish, and she's doing pretty good with hers here lately, and that's good. Sonny's up and about, and that's good. Continue to remember Pat Busby, as she's had her injuries, and of course Rob. And we've got a couple of new ones here. Vicki Crattley, this is Daniel's sister-in-law with some serious health issues. Remember her. Henry Green, this is Trish Crattley's nephew with the flu, and Sammy Mitchell, a friend of Thomas Kime, who has leukemia. And so remember these various individuals, and I certainly continue to remember David Lemons. David used to preach in Dublin. He's now in Kentucky. We mentioned him a week or so ago. I got an update on him last night. He has a very serious, rare form of thyroid cancer. I forgot what it was actually called, but it was a very rare form. And really the survival rate's very slim. I saw the email I got last night, or information was sent to me last night, is that he will be, I guess, at Vanderbilt, undergoing treatment for about 7 weeks, 6 or 7 weeks, like 30 different radiations in that short period of time. And so not a good setup for him, but remember David Lemons is very, very, very sick, very serious issue with him. And of course, there's a lot of other folks, a lot of things going on. Don't forget that next week, next Saturday, is our cleanup day at 9 o'clock here at the building. And the gospel meeting at Hartley Bridge starts today. And each evening, Monday and Tuesday evening, they will be 7 o'clock. There'll be 2 lessons. As we understand from the other day, the first lesson run about 20 minutes. They'll have a song or so, then they'll have another 20-minute lesson. So you're going to get 2 lessons in there each evening, and still probably get out about the same time you normally would. So I really like that format they're using. I was impressed by that. And so hopefully we'll have some who'll be able to make it over to Hartley Bridge the next couple of nights and support them in that effort. Any other sick that we need to be aware of at this time? I know we do have several out of town. I know Linda and them's out of town this morning. Hopefully they'll be back tonight. Joe had mentioned that he'd be out of town this week. I'm not sure who else may be out of town, but looking at our slim number this morning, I think we may have several that's out of town. Maybe they'll catch up with us later. All right. If there's no other announcements at this time, we do want to make mention of the fact before we go on, I'm about to forget this, that the latest day at Warner Robins, the 29th, at 9 o'clock that morning, Evelyn Apple will be the speaker, and they won't know those RSVPs by tomorrow. So any of you ladies planning to go, you can either let them know, or if you'll let Ginger know, she'll contact them for everybody here. So any that's planning to go to the Warner Robins Lady Day, that's coming up in 2 weeks. Andrew, you lead us in a word of prayer to start, please.
Study your word and show ourselves approved. Thank you so much for Bible study and Sunday school, Father, that we making progress, being encouraged with Brother Harriet teaching. Lord, I pray for the one that's not here, whatever their problem and situation is, I pray that you will secure them with your grace and mercy. Bring them back to be with us as a family member, Father. I pray that we will take this lesson this morning, Father, and fly to our life and make the next week even brighter. This is our prayer in your Son, Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Thank you. We are doing a study on the life of Christ, and we are looking at it from the standpoint of the genealogies we looked at a couple weeks ago, and from the standpoint of his youth. And as we had mentioned, there's really, you got the prophecy of his birth, you got the birth, and then from there until the age of 12, there's just really very, very little said about the life of Christ. We do know that he was obedient to his parents. He was very respectful of them. We know that he grew in stature and wisdom. But a couple of weeks ago we looked at Matthew chapter 1 and the genealogies and the prophecies and so forth. Last week we looked at John and had some good information to come from John. Today we're going to be looking somewhat at Luke and see what Luke has to say about John and about Christ himself. This guy called Luke, who was he? He was a physician. Just the very fact that he was a physician, what should that tell us about him? He would be educated, yes. He would be educated. And obviously he was. But now, whenever we consider Luke chapter 1, that's primarily going to be our focus today from Luke 1. It says, this is a letter to Theophilus. Who is this guy called Theophilus? Who is this guy? What do we know about him? Okay. Whenever we consider this individual, Theophilus, it has been suggested that he's probably some sort of a government official. Don't really give a whole lot of detail about him, but he was one who was of some significance here, and and so he probably somewhat as a significant individual. But anyway, that being said, whenever we consider the writings here that we're going to be looking at in Luke chapter 1, it has been suggested that Luke was probably written after Matthew and Mark and before John. That has been a suggestion that has been made, and it could be other writings as well. It says, for as many, let me get my eyes focused here. For as much as many have taken in hand to set forth in order a declaration of those things which are most surely believed among us. Those things which are believed, the things that have been written beforehand, and something that may be a reference to Matthew and Mark, and perhaps other writings of that time. Certainly, Luke was a physician. He was a very educated individual. He certainly would have access to what other writings there may have been. And so it's making it a reference into those situations. And it talks about, even as they delivered them in verse 2, unto us, which from the beginning were eyewitnesses and ministers of the word. Those who were eyewitnesses, those who were there, who had saw it. And so he's getting a lot of his information from the eyewitnesses. And so Then he's going to come on down, talks about verses 3 and 4 about this Theophilus. He says in verse 3, most excellent Theophilus. I can't hardly pronounce that big a fancy word there. It seemed going good to me also, having perfect understanding of all things from the very first, to write unto thee in order, most excellent Theophilus. Most excellent. And that's where many have come up with the idea, since he's given such recognition, that perhaps he is a government official. Don't know if that's fact or not, but that has been suggested to be the case, that he might be a high-ranking official. But that kind of brings us up to the main point that we want to get to. And in verses 5 through 7, the angels are foretelling about the birth of John. Now, this time period was Herod the Great. It was in that time period. We see in verse 5 there was in the days of Herod, the king of Judea, a certain priest named Zacharias. So right off the bat, we know that Zacharias is a priest. And as a priest, what would be some of his duties, some of his responsibilities? Teaching, offer sacrifices, and these are correct. So these would be some of the things that he would be related to. So there was a certain priest named Zacharias of the course of Abiah, and his wife was of the daughters of Aaron, and her name was Elizabeth. So you got Zachariah, days of Herod. He was a priest, and his wife her name is Elizabeth. This is stuff we already knew, of course. I think everybody in here already understood and knew that. That's who this is. And as we talk about Zacharias and his wife Elizabeth, we see that they were righteous before God, and so they were righteous. They were God-fearing people, and so they had a lot of good qualities. And they have no children, as we see in verse 7. And they had no child because Elizabeth, they had not had any children, and they are getting old. They're aged and long in years, and so they have no children. And so that a little bit of history about them, who they are, and the fact that they are moving along in years. And in verse 8 gets into some real interesting things here about Zacharias. And it came to pass that while he executed the priest's office before God in the order of his course. And so he was executing or going about the task or the things that were necessary as he would be involved in doing the priestly duties here. And see in verse 9, according to custom of the priest's office, his lot was to burn incense when he went into the temple of the Lord. So let's stop right there for a second. When did they burn these incenses? How often? Huh? Twice daily, yes. Exodus 30, verses 7 and 8. Twice daily, morning and evening. They burned these incenses. And as we consider these incenses that were to be burnt, they did it daily. There is a golden altar in there, and there's other furnishings in there, and and the lot. It talks about a lot. It's not talking about an open field here now. What does it mean talking about the lot? As we see in verse 8 and 9, in verse 9, according to the custom of the priest's office, his lot was to burn incense when he went into the temple of the Lord. What does lot mean? It was up to him to do it as a responsibility. But what's a lot? What does that mean, lot?
His responsibility.
Well, that's what we just said, his responsibility, yeah?
That's all I would say.
Yeah, but how did his lot, if you will, and maybe phrase it this way, how did his lot or that responsibility come to him? How did it fall upon him, that lot? From the tribe, right? It is suggested that, and I don't know if this is 100% accurate or not, but has been suggested that there could be, at that time, perhaps 20,000 priests. That's a lot. Now, and there's 3 different lots that it talks about. Lot 1, Lot 2, and Lot 3. The casting of lots, you ever heard that expression? They talk about with the crucifix, they cast lots, who did what? That's what it means right there. Going to cast lots to see who does what. Now, that being said, you had the 3 lots. The first lot, lot number 1, it was to find out of all the various priests, however many there may have been, how many, whoever lot number 1 was, that individual would clean the altar, prepare the fire. And lot number 2, that individual would actually kill the sacrifice. But the 3rd lot would be the one who burned the incense. And it was suggested that perhaps, they cast the lots, it might very well be that you only, in your lifetime, that only come around one time to you to do this. Maybe more, depending on how the lots fell. But maybe you may not get but one shot at this. And to be the one to burn the incense, that was a big honor. That was a big deal. And, you would have the 3. They would enter. And you would have the one who done the cleaning and the preparing and all. Then you would have the one who done the killing of the sacrifice. Then they would leave. And that would leave lot number 3, the one who's going to burn the incense. And that individual, that was an honor. That was a big honor. And whenever the other 2 would leave him in there and they would come out, that would be your signal to the crowd that the burning of the incense has begun. And it's only going to be a matter of time then he's going to come out. And we're going to see some things related to that as we look a little bit further at this morning. So that's kind of where we are with these lots and how it comes to pass, so forth. But, it says in verse 9, it was his turn to burn the incense. He went into the temple of the Lord. Now, and the whole multitude of the people were praying without at the time of incense. The multitude, the crowds, they're on the outside. They're praying because he's inside. He's burning the incense. He himself is praying. And, they are waiting and expecting within a reasonable amount of time, whatever that time element may be, that he's going to reappear. But then notice what happens. And there appeared unto him an angel of the Lord standing on the right side of the altar of incense. Now Zacharias is in the temple of the Lord, burning the incense. And what's he doing? While he is burning the incense, what is he doing? Yes. Yes. He himself is praying. typically speaking, and I realize there may be exceptions to this, but typically speaking, when people are praying, what do they generally do? Bow the head, close your eyes. And granted, there's exceptions to that, of course. But typically that's the case. They will bow their head, they will close their eyes. Now consider where he is. He is in the temple of the Lord. This great honor of burning the incense. The people outside are praying. He's on the inside praying. And you're right, in all probability, whether his head's bowed or not, or whatever, he's before the presence of the Lord, he's praying. I would suspect his eyes are closed tightly. Now, there appears to him, as we see, verse 11, an angel of the Lord standing on the right side of the altar. And when Zacharias saw him, he was troubled, and fear fell upon him. Have you ever had your eyes closed tight? And when you open your eyes, maybe things are a little blurry for a few seconds until you get your focus and all back in place. Can you imagine what he might have thought when he opened his eyes and here at the altar, on the right-hand side of the altar, there appeared an angel of the Lord. It's not a dream. It's real. Here's this angel of the Lord that has appeared. Wonder what our thoughts would have been. I closed my eyes, you weren't there, and I opened my eyes, there you are. It troubled him. He became afraid. Could probably somewhat understand his feelings. And we look at this. The angel tells him, no, fear not, in verse 13, fear not, for thy prayer is heard, and thy wife Elizabeth shall bear thee a son, and thou shalt call his name John. And let's stop right there for a second. The angel tells Zacharias, your prayer is heard. Now let's think about that prayer for a second. Your prayer is heard. Whenever we consider the scenario here, he's praying, probably has his eyes closed. He opens up and there's the angel. And the angel says, don't be afraid, your prayer has been heard. One might wonder what that prayer may have been. Now, this is speculation. What would you suppose he might have been praying for at this time? The angel says your prayer has been heard.
Could have been like us to do his will, make sure he do everything perfect.
Okay.
Because when he was better off than we were, because he told him that his prayer was heard.
Uh-huh.
We have to pray in faith. And
True.
that it'll be answered. So that's a big difference.
That's true. Now, Trish said perhaps for the child. If you read the text, you would read that into that. You would assume that. But think about it.
You ready praying for a child?
Huh? Do what?
You ready praying for the kid?
Maybe not.
He may have been praying for him for a long time.
There you are right there. There's your answer right there. Not necessarily this particular prayer.
Right.
I mean, probably, and I think you're exactly right. They've probably been praying for this child for a long time. She is barren. They have no children. You know, and now they're aged, they're old. You know, in your old age, you haven't had a child in all of these years. What's the likelihood of having a child now? Not very good. Pretty slim, isn't it? But I think Trish is exactly right. Your prayer has been heard. Probably, and it doesn't say that, but probably a prayer, ongoing prayer for over the generations, over the years. Now, what about some of our prayers? People today pray for various things, whatever it may be. You pray for something, whatever it is. Do you always get an answer right then and there? No. Later on, you may get a yes, you may get a no, you may get a maybe. But you don't always get an answer right then. For example, people may pray for their spouse or their children, that these individuals, that they be faithful, that they obey the gospel. And, you know, that prayer may not be answered as you would like for it to be for years.
Pray without ceasing, but pray and be patient.
Very true. Very true.
That comes later.
So, you know, this could be that type of prayer. This has been an ongoing prayer. But it's been answered. So, let's go beyond that now. And I think that says a lot about that. But he says, your wife's going to have a child, she's going to bear a son, and his name's going to be John. And thou shalt have joy and gladness, and many shall rejoice at his birth. Before conception, these events are being told about who John is and what he's going to do, and the results. It says, for he shall be great in the sight of the Lord, and shall drink neither wine nor strong drink, and he shall be filled with the Holy Ghost, even from his mother's womb. And then many of the children of Israel shall he turn to the Lord their God. A lot's being told right here about who he is, what he's going to do, and the impact he's going to have on life. So some very powerful verses right here regarding him and the things that's going to be taking place. Now, this here is so significant, verse 17. And he shall go before him in spirit of the power of Elias, to turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the disobedient to the wisdom of the just, to make ready a people prepared for the Lord, the forerunner of Christ. Make ready the people. Now, consider this poor old Zacharias, however old he may be. He and Elizabeth are along in years. She's barren. Probably have prayed numerous times for a child over the years. And all of a sudden, here's this angel that appeared to you. Andrew, you're going to have a son. What would your reaction be? Yeah, perhaps, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, very well could be.
They say it did it bring joy. So
Yeah,
I think the answer would be, who, me?
exactly right. Who, me? As we see in verse 19,
right.
or verse 18 rather, and Zacharias said unto the angel, whereby shall I know this? I hear what you're saying, but how do I know this? Are you kidding me? We would be the type person that if we had just received this information, we would look at that angel and say, you got to be kidding. You know, that might very well be our reaction. Basically, that's his reaction. How do I know this is true? I hear what you're saying, but we're old. We have no children, haven't had any. How do I know this is true? As we see in verse 18. Sarah laughed. That's exactly right. That is exactly right. And we see in verse 18, he said, I'm old and my wife is well stricken in years. I hear what you're saying, but I got my doubts. That might be our attitude. Probably would be. But in verse 19, the angel answered and said, I am Gabriel, that stand in the presence of God, and am sent to speak unto thee and to show thee these glad tidings. I have been sent by God to bring this information to you. And notice what he said here in verse 19. In the latter part of the verse there. I am sent to speak unto you and to bring you these glad tidings. What is glad tidings? What does that mean? We sometimes use that and read and use those two words, glad tidings. Good news. Good news. What else is often associated with that expression, glad tidings? The birth of Christ, yes. The gospel. Good news is the gospel. And so, I'm bringing you good news. I'm bringing you glad tidings. And there is a connection to the gospel here. So, now, Bill, you bring up a good point. He already asked the question, how do I know this is true? He had it,
I had thought, he had some doubts out of all of
Yeah.
this up until that point.
Yeah.
Then you get news like that.
But he wants some assurance. He wants a sign. I want to know that this is what's going to happen. Well, absolutely. That is exactly right.
His ways are not our ways.
Nope. That's right. We don't always understand that, but that's right. But no. He's somewhat doubtful of something. No, I'm not too sure about this. But he wants a sign. Well, he's getting ready to get a sign, all right. He's going to get one he won't forget for a while. And the people waited for Zacharias and marveled that he tarried so long in the temple. He's in there longer than they expected. Can you imagine what the people outside might be thinking? What's going on in there? Yeah, is he sick? Something happened in there? Exactly. And what's going on? They're outside. He's inside. And so they're surprised that it took him so long. But hey, they ain't seen the surprise yet. In verse 22, when he came out, he could not speak. He could not speak. Wow. Wow. In verse 22 is that they perceived he had seen a vision in the temple, for he beckoned to them and remained speechless. Well, consider the events of that day. Here he is, a priest. Maybe once in a lifetime, perhaps, the opportunity to be the one to burn the incense. The greatest honor in that aspect of the priest there. Twice a day, as Daniel had pointed out. And here he is, he's going to be able to be the one to burn the incense. But this is a distinctive honor, privilege. Maybe the highlight of his life at this point, perhaps. It's a big deal. And do you suppose, and again it's speculation of course, maybe those before him that had gone in and had burned incense before, wonder if maybe he had talked with them some in previous times, what's it like, what to expect, things of this nature, kind of just general conversation that we would have, maybe, maybe not. What to expect, the anticipation, the excitement, maybe a little nervous. Then all these events took place. And he comes out and he can't speak. He can't speak. What a turn of events. You know, what a turn of events. You know, in verses 21 through 23, appears to the crowd. And as soon as the days of administration were accomplished, he departed to his own house. And so he goes home. And in verses 24 and 25, talks about Elizabeth. How she conceived and hid herself 5 months, saying, Thus hath the Lord dealt with me in the days wherein he looked on me, to take away my reproach among men. You know, this had been a prayer that they had had for so long. It had been a very significant prayer. No telling how long this prayer had gone on. And now you know you're going to have a child. It's a time of thanksgiving. And he's been told the magnitude of the importance of this child. The forerunner of Christ. You know, a lot was told. We just looked at a few moments ago. So they have a lot to be thankful for. Well, those verses 28 and 29. As the angel appears to Mary. And the angel came unto her and said, Hail, thou that art highly favored, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women. And when she saw him, she was troubled at his saying, and cast in her mind what manner of salutation this should be. Well, consider 3 things. We see in verse 28, when the angel appeared to Mary, and he's telling her about Christ, she is highly favored. Of all the people that were in the world at that time, she was the one that was chosen to give birth to our Lord. She was highly favored. And then as we come on down, you know, as we see she's highly favored in verse 28. And then also in verse 28, the Lord was with her. She's favored. The Lord's with her. And she is blessed among women. Three powerful statements are made about Mary right here. She's highly favored. The Lord's with her. And she is blessed among women. That's exactly right. Out of all the women, he chose her.
That sounds like an ideal statement.
I tell you what.
That's an honor, though, ain't it?
Well, consider who done the choosing.
God.
Absolutely. Yes, it's an honor.
Very good honor.
You know, God chose her to give birth physical birth to his child. The magnitude of that. And consider not only from the standpoint of giving birth to Christ, but given the responsibility of being an earthly parents to this child.
Look how great he is being born and what he gonna do.
Yeah.
Already set life.
Absolutely.
That's a lot.
It's a lot there. Powerful. And, so this is not just some event out of it. Just, well, here it is. This is powerful. Very powerful. Then we notice verses 30 through 33. And the angel said unto her, Fear not, Mary, for thou hast found favor with God. And behold, thou shalt conceive in thy womb and bring forth a son, and shalt call his name Jesus. He shall be great, and shall be called the Son of the Highest, and the Lord God shall give unto him the throne of his father David, and he shall reign over the house of Jacob forever, and his kingdom there shall be no end. Wow. We read in Matthew chapter 1 a couple weeks ago about the announcement of the birth of Christ. Here's Luke's account. And if we look here in verses 30 through 33, he can call his name Jesus, which we read earlier. He shall be great, Son of God, in verse 32. And the Lord shall give unto him the throne of his father David. He shall reign over the house of Jacob forever, and of his kingdom there shall be no end. What's the kingdom? Think about that. Have we ever really stopped to think about that? Here at the announcement of his birth by the angel to Mary, he makes reference to the kingdom that will have no end. Says a lot. It says a lot. So often, as we do our Bible readings at home and whatever, everybody has their own routines and so forth. But as we do our studying at home, we'll read, and we certainly get a lot of things out of it. But at the same time, many times, if we will actually stop, think, break these verses down, there's a lot of meat there that we overlook a lot of times. There's a lot there we don't get. Am I the only one here that likes chicken? No, I promise you I'm not. I told Ginger and Brittany yesterday. Yesterday was a momentous day for Warner Robins. A day that will go down in history. The Bojangles and Watson opened yesterday. Man, I am at home now. There you go. I can't afford, but that's for rich folks. But you ever take a chicken leg? Boy, ain't that some good eating? You look down, you still got a lot of meat on that bone. Yeah. I'm saying that to say this. Sometimes when we skim over, if we're not careful, we're going to leave meat on the bone. There's a lot here that we sometimes fail to pick up. Not just here, but in many, many different places that we read. Read for understanding, not just for the sake of reading. So we've looked at Matthew 1, Luke 1, and we've looked at John 1. At the early genealogies, the foretelling of Christ, the connection between John and Christ. And we're going to continue on, and we're going to begin to move forward into his early childhood and some of the events that took place there as we began to go further and further through his life. Oh, we'll stop there. Good discussion as always. Appreciate that.